Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Reacher, Season 3, Episode 3. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, immediately picking up after last episode, I was so curious how the whole Angel situation was going to be dealt with, because last episode I suggested, I was like, well, only thing you could do is have Reacher go clean up the crime scene, but basically it's like after Duke drops him off, it's like, all right, he immediately calls up Duffy, and it's like, yo, I need you to leave me a vehicle a certain place and a change of clothes. I was like, what is the change of clothes about? And then like he waited until midnight, got his rest in when he could. I was like, okay, what are we doing? So he swims across to where he needs to get to. I was like, that's impressive. It's like, right, change your clothes. I was like, yeah, last thing you want to do is come back with dripping wet clothes. You want to try and like cover this up as much as possible. You know, simplify things for yourself. So strolls up in his boxers, and even, you know, Duffy's like, hey, yo, which you're like, is it going to happen? Kind of has to. Every season there's going to be like a female lead that like he has to hook up with. Hey, maybe they won't, but it's like, well, it happened in season 1 with Roscoe. It happened in season 2, you know, with Dixon. So I was wondering, like, yo, Duffy. I don't know why it didn't immediately cross my mind in the first 2 episodes. It's not till she was checking him out this episode I was like, all right, I forgot that is kind of a theme of this series. So, well, I mean, I'm sure it's very much like, I'm sure like in the same vein as like a James Bond, where it's just like, oh, just new person he hooks up with and stuff like that. Not necessarily what you immediately go for, but you know, on the job, get close, stuff happens, yada yada yada. So initially Richard just wants to go by himself because he needs to clean up a crime scene, but Duffy wants to go at the place to look for Teresa, any signs of Teresa. So, all right, come on. It's like, oh, cool. They break in. It's like, cool, we should, the doors, we don't have to pick the lock because Angel Doll didn't have time to lock up. And it's like, who's Angel Doll? Oh, hey, Duffy, meet Angel Doll. And she's super okay with the murder. I mean, obviously he's come across cops who were not too many fans, especially in season 1, of like, oh, like just the blatant murder. It's like, but she's okay with, because like, these guys are scum. It's also like, well, she's kind of doing an off the books. You know, it's just her and her team, her 2 other people, Billy and Elliot. So it's like, sure, it makes sense that she'd start the line, but also like, oh, these guys are criminals and they're not the good guys. So it's not that big of a deal for her. You know, it's kind of like, she even says it later on, the world will probably be better off. I'm like, Jesus, that's not something you want to hear an FBI agent say. It's like, once again, there are people who suck, but you're still just kind of like, but hey, it's Reacher, just keep it pushing, you know? So they hide the body and his car in a container, and immediately have to kill the 2 drivers later on and put their bodies in a different container because they already put them in this one container, locked it, and Reacher threw away the key. So I was like, cool. Which I'm also like, even though he's like, oh, these were kind of like out here, so like no one's going to check these. If at all, it's going to be a very long time for now. But I'm just like, it just feels like you saying that makes me feel like at some point during the season, somebody is going to check those storage containers and to find these like 3 dead bodies maybe. I don't know. Because they were trying to find any signs of Teresa, but there were none. So, but it's like, well, we know that she wasn't here, you know, so there's that, you know, it at least gives them a place to start knowing it wasn't here. So it eliminates like, okay, any possibilities. But beyond that, well, they luckily did walk away with some evidence. They were able to get Angel Doll's laptop, which doesn't help them as much. They later on find out there's a shipment happening, but what the contents of it was, who knows? I mean, it's like, as a criminal, do you want to have evidence laid about with the a manifest of everything that's up there? I think it's probably a good thing that there isn't. I don't know if that was Angel just being crappy at his job, or was that just meant to be as vague as possible just in case someone got access to it. I don't know. So interesting too, because Duke had told Reacher earlier in the episode, like at the beginning of the episode, like, yo, did Angel Doll say anything? He's like, no, why? He's like, well, he wanted to tell Beck something, so he wanted to work his way up the ladder, so like he would only tell Beck. And I was like, oh, it heavily benefits you that Angel Doll was an opportunist looking for his chance to go up the ladder, so he went over Duke. So he talked to Duke, but he didn't tell Duke what it was because he wanted to get in touch with Beck directly. So heavily worked out for Reacher in that regard. I also forgot to talk about the fact is that he's talking to Neely a little bit this episode. She was also being like, "Oh man, kudos to you," when it found out like, "Oh yeah, Angel Doll is dead." It's like, "Oh, kudos to you." But then she's like, "Yo, what's this all about?" He's like, "I recognize someone," and she's like, "Who?" And he's like, "Someone I thought I put down years ago." And she immediately sits up. She's like, "Quinn?" So it's like, yeah, she knows what this is, and it does sound like, because he kept it vague, like in episode 1, making it seem like someone else did it, but I was like, it had to be Reacher for him to be like so sure that the person was dead. It's like, did he even know that Quinn was out there until he saw him? Or like I said, it feels like there's still context we don't know. I mean, he told them why he was here in Maine. Once again, it was for like lobster or whatever. But I'm like, I don't know if like he saw Quinn previously or something related to Quinn got on his radar and that's why he's here. Or was it just pure happenstance? It's like, I mean, that's storytelling for you, like, the serendipity of stuff happening. And like, the fact is that someone connected to Reacher's past, he just happened to run into him. But I mean, that's storytelling for you, right? But I still wonder, like, could it really just be that much of a chance? Or because I don't even know why he was there in that area, like, when he's stopping that kid from, like, robbing that woman. Like, that mother, like, I don't know what he was doing there in the first place. Like, he just happened to be in that spot, the sequence. So, but yeah, it goes into why it makes a lot of sense once again why he would specifically go out of his way not to tell Neely, because he knows, and Neely made it clear last episode and this episode, like, yo, tell me where you're at, boss, or drop everything. I got your back, because she knows how important this is. And even he's like, yo, don't even try tracking my phone, because you won't be able to, because there's restrictions on it, because it's an FBI phone, so it's like there's protections on it, so she won't be able to. But it's like Neely's got enough connects, and she's smart enough to know to like find a way around that. So she'll definitely find her way to you eventually. It might take some time. That's why I brought up previously. I was like, I wonder what's this something 110 related? The reason why Neely knows about it as well, or is it something post the 110? Like I said, because I don't remember the time frame of when that happened, the years and stuff. So, because like I said, the Quinn thing was like 12 years ago when he was supposedly killed. So, someone I was kind of suspicious of last episode, we get to learn a little bit more about her, is one of the maids, the one that Richard like ends up connecting with a little bit this episode. I meant to talk about it last episode, her cleaning. Was that last episode or was that episode 1? I think it was last episode when Reacher caught her coming out of his room because she had just cleaned it. I was like suspicious at first. I was like, did you check that place again for bugs? But it's like nothing ever came up so far, so it's like, no, I'm sure he's smart enough to check it again just to make sure, but we never saw that in the confines of the episode. But I was like, oh, her just happened to clean this place. I think she said she's basically working for Beck because she's trying to, what was that? I think she's trying to like make a whole bunch of money for like to be able to go to like, was it a business that she's trying to start? I can't remember her reasons, but she's got very altruistic reasons. And it's also a thing of, I just keep my head down and do my job. That's all it is. So, she doesn't really know the ins and outs of anything going on here, her or the other lady. It's like, yeah, we just do our jobs. That's all there is to it. So the fact is we're getting to know her a little bit more makes me feel like she will at least play a decent role in this. Like, whether it's a situation of like she's going to like back up Reacher, like cover for him when something goes down and he needs a lie and she covers for him, or she'll kind of come in last minute being helpful, not unless we find out, well, you just never know who's going to be some traitorous character. So there's always a possibility she could end up being a bad guy, but for now I'm going to give it a benefit of doubt. But gotta be a little suspicious about anyone at any point in time. We have Reacher stuck on kind of quote-unquote babysitting duty as he's looking after Richard, but he's also trying to find out like more about his father's operation. So we had learned previously that Beck wasn't in control of everything. It's like, right, he's kind of answering to someone else. We find out it's was it Julius McCabe, I think, which later on it's Billy and Duffy who end up catching like photos of Quinn. So the question is like, is he McCabe, or is he Because at first I was like, oh, so what's Quinn's role in this? If there's a McCabe, so who's Quinn and where's his role in all of this? But it's like not less McCabe and Quinn are the same because he came out the car. But I thought the way they were saying like, oh, it's the driver, but then the only person that got out of the car was Quinn. So I'm like, oh, I guess he is, because they were all keeping an eye on him. So this is his operation. Because we learn later on from Richard that McCabe basically came in and stole his father's operation. This is basically kind of like they're prisoners in this. Not only Richard, but also his dad. Like Paulie and even Duke are not. Well, I think Duke's amongst that too. But they're all people that work for, at least Paulie is. Maybe Duke wasn't. Maybe Duke was just like a person, because he was like a cop that broke bad and started working like as a lackey for criminals. But I don't remember if he worked for Julius or not, because I feel like the ending of the episode would play out a little differently if Duke was. So it's like he definitely had to be in Beck. He was Beck's employee, so definitely not someone there put in place like Paulie was by Julius. But yeah, they're meant to keep an eye on them. Because I'd also wondered, like, the bodyguard that's captured, I'm like, was that by Beck's orders? Or was that like another person by Julius? It seems like Paulie's the only one that's Julius, because you figured like that would have come up. I mean, they referenced a bodyguard, but I don't think they were talking about that bodyguard. But I mean, not unless he is, because that's going to be a problem if he does work directly with Julius. But either way, Richard's dad sold only rugs initially, we find out, but basically he had a way to skirt around having to pay some stuff, paying off the right people, and basically he ran his mouth off to the wrong people, told too many people, and it ended up leading to McCabe finding out about it and hijacking the whole operation and business, and now they're kind of basically being held hostage. We end up finding out McCabe's the one that initially kidnapped Richard, and that Paulie himself is the one that sliced off Richard's ear. You're like, Jesus, that's got to suck. You're constantly around the guy. He's not meant to be your protector. He's meant to keep you in line. He's your prison warden in a lot of ways. But the same bastard who like is keeping you there, has an eye on you, is the same bastard to cut your ear off. I was like, that's all kinds of fucked. It's an obviously interesting information drop about and reveal about all of this, where you kind of feel like, oh, maybe Beck's not the bad guy necessarily, but I mean, even Richard's like, yeah, my dad is a piece of shit, but he's like, yeah, regardless of all that, he's like, I still love him, and he's all conflicted about it, because I guess his dad was, he's like, right, my dad barely has enough time for himself or me or anything else, because this whole thing was like, Richard was like, this whole excursion was so that Richard could get this like very specific like cap pistol for his dad, because his dad talked about it a lot when he was a kid. It got confiscated, the person lost it, so this was something that meant a lot to his dad, and he got it to him for him as a 50th birthday gift. But it's like the thing of like I said, just I guess his dad wasn't like the best person and even less of a good person now and all this, but he's not the worst. So I guess it could always be a situation. And I assume maybe the end result will be getting them kind of in a witness protection program, maybe by the end of this, maybe not. But I even love the whole bit where it's just like Richard was talking about his dad being a piece of shit. He's like, "Would you know anything about that?" And then Richard's like, "No, my dad was no, I wouldn't. My dad was a great guy." Like, I love that. It's like, yeah, just like okay, and just like the very like stoic, matter of fact way he goes about saying that. Also, the whole lavender ice cream bit where they toss it away, and even later on, Richard's like, "Yeah, that does suck." He's like, "See." Only acceptable flavors are vanilla and chocolate. Everything outside of that is nonsense. What about strawberries? Like, only in a pinch, which is kind of funny because like I've been around my nieces and nephew, like when it came to like a Neapolitan ice cream, which is like chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. It would always be a situation where they would always eat like the chocolate and vanilla would always leave the strawberry, which are, it's kind of very like, it's like, oh yeah, it kind of goes in line with that same very conversation. So I just thought that was interesting. But also during that whole sequence, Richard also got approached by some people who have beef with him. It's like when your dad is who your dad is, and he's kind of screwed over a lot of people, destroyed businesses just to expand his own. Now, Richard always probably had to deal with that. He got bullied by these people. He's like, back when I was in like a kid, and they kept it up. But Richard's there to kick some ass, and I love. He's like, hey, you're ugly, and you just learn how to deal with it. It's like life is life. It doesn't make it okay what Richard's dad did, but at the end of the day, you kind of deal with the hand you're dealt, just like you being ugly. And the guy's just like wanting to start shit, and Richard's like, "Oh, so you're stupid and ugly," and it proceeds to whoop their ass, and it's just like, yeah. So that was just kind of a nice little sequence in the middle of all of that. So, but circling back to Richard and the whole Quinn, McCabe of it all. Richard doesn't know what it is that's actually being sold. Like, he was lying about the rug stain, but at the end of the day, like, he nor his dad knows what this operation really is all about. Like, is it drugs? Probably not. Is it weapons? Who knows? I doubt it's a human trafficking situation, but you never know. So that's still the big kind of question mark in this whole situation. We also had this situation where Elliot got left behind while Duffy and Billy are looking into following the shipments and stuff. And during that whole situation, the guy that's held captive, Cooper, ends up like injuring himself just so that he could like get Elliot closer to him. And I was like, is he gonna really like buy it? Come like, oh, Elliot, don't make a mistake. I was like, where the guy's hands are positioned, I don't see it. I mean, because I think Elliot, wasn't paying as much attention. I was like, does Elliot have his gun on him? Because like, is this guy going to reach for your gun or something? But nothing happens. But he's talking to Elliot. He's like, oh, I get it. What's it like to be on the lower end of the totem pole? I got stuck babysitting this rich kid. I get it. But the guy's like, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get close to me. And just Elliot ignores him. But he leaves the alcohol open. And I'm like, my only assumption is, oh, you're going to use it like to be able to slip out of like, whatever restraint they have you bound by, whether it's handcuffs or not. Feels like that's it. And because obviously the last thing you want is this bastard free, because once he's free, he's going to screw up everything by revealing the truth about, hey, for one, I'm still alive, even though I'm supposed to be dead. Once again, it throws Reacher's whole story turns into complete and utter BS. Especially because that was already ruminating earlier in the episode, because Beck got contacted by Angel Dog and left a message saying like, oh, I read the vehicle. It belonged to someone that he had done business with, but none of it matched up because like the guy that Reacher described isn't employed with these people. Plus he used an Uzi. These people use very different guns. Richard later on had made the whole point about like, right, his dad is super into guns, which keeps coming up. So especially at the end of the episode, it ends up being really relevant. Him being very focused and knowing all this stuff about guns and different types. So, but Reacher luckily is able to kind of skirt his way past a lot of stuff and just kind of skirt past all this BS. I think it's interesting too. An element I forgot to also bring up earlier was Duffy and Reacher talking about his beef with Quinn. He's like, it wasn't me that he did something to, but it was someone he knew from his military days. He was like a first lieutenant, Dominique, and I believe Dominique is the name of the next episode, so we'll probably flash back to that. But the fact is, all we saw was a swinging door. You're just like, it must have been brutal or something. The fact is that that's all we get, and they're not trying to like, not even hint more to what happened. The fact is, he doesn't even say anything. He shuts down. I mean, Richard's the keep to himself. He's, the stoic hero of like, he keeps a lot of stuff bottled up. But the fact is, he shuts down even more specifically with this makes me feel like it must have been something horrendous that happened to her. The reason why. I don't know if it's a thing if she was undercover and she got exposed and Quinn did something horrendous to her just to prove a point, or was he just a psychopath that did something horrendous just because? And then finally, we have the situation leading into the end of the episode where Duke, Beck, and Reacher are going to go because they track down the guys because they were able to use the Angel Doll's email. Duffy was able to send a message to Beck being like, oh, I found the locations of the guys who tried to kidnap Richard. So they go there, this whole setup, because Reacher's got it played out in his head a little bit, but he's still figuring it out as we go, trying to take advantage of it because he makes it clear, like, I need to become Beck's number 2 because that's the only way I'm going to find out the real shit about all this, because that information is not being disseminated amongst all the workers. So I was like, I've got to get rid of Duke somehow and put myself in that position of number 2. And on the drive there, obviously, and Reacher brought it up earlier in episode 2 that Beck does care about his son. It does seem genuine. And he's concerned when he hears, like, oh, I heard you beat up those guys. He's like, they deserve it. He's like, no, based on what I heard, they did. And it's just kind of like he was upset when he heard about what happened to his son. It's just kind of like, man, I'm glad you were there. Those kids deserve their ass kicked. And then you heard Duke just being an asshole, being like, well, if you ask me, it was kind of a good thing for Richard to get his ass kicked because he's too much of a pussy or whatever. And then, like, Beck shuts down and doesn't, like, retort or anything. But then Richard's just like, good thing no one asked you, huh? And it's just like, man. And at first, that's why I was kind of like, wait, is it just because you don't want to say anything to maybe one of Julius's guys? But like I said, I think Duke was your guy. So I'm like, why didn't you? And then maybe it's because he's like, my son is soft-hearted. Probably, like, he probably looks at his son as, like, kind of soft-hearted and kind of weaker. But he probably thinks of his wife, Richard's mom, when, so he's like, yeah, he takes after her. She was a good person, not a piece of shit like me, because I think he even recognizes that, but who knows? Or maybe he blames himself for not just being there in his son's life as much as he should be. Either way, I was so curious to see how Reacher was going to play this whole situation. Lead Duke to the house and be like, oh my God, there's 6 people inside. You go this way and I'm going to follow behind. He's like, no. I know enough stuff where it's like, once they get their bearings, the second guy's the one that always gets shot first. I'm going to go first. He's like, okay, sure. And then Reacher catches him off guard, and it's like, all right, you can live and go if you tell me what's going on. And the guy's like, I'm not telling you anything. The fact of the matter is, you're a cop. You're not going to do anything to me. And you're like, and I was hoping Reacher would be like, I'm not a cop, but Reacher, a man of few to no word, just not saying anything, pops him in the head and just, it's like, oh, that's it. It's like, hey, I'm me. I'm cheesy. I want to, like, explain anything to be like, sorry, buddy, I'm not a cop. And then, like, shoot him in the leg or something just to make it. But it's like, no, that won't give you what you want. It's like, well, plan B, just shoot him in the head, kind of. And then stage the whole thing. Shots fired all over the place. And he was using Angel's gun. And he's like, huh. I was like, what are you going to do with that? I thought maybe you're going to leave it at a crime scene. I'm like, I doubt that. I'm like, how is that going to be relevant? Well, he sets off some cans in the microwave, and then he also has the gas leaking out, causes a bit of explosion. He walks out injured, being like, "Oh my God, the whole thing was a setup. There was a grenade that was tossed. Duke is dead. Oh my God, this whole thing was a setup. Oh wait, who pointed us in that direction? Oh my God, it was Angel. That bastard was behind it." Especially when Reacher's like, "Oh, I found this gun too," and it's like, oh my God, it's Angel's gun. How do you know? It's a very specific model. It's very rare. Plus, I gave it to him myself. I was like, oh. And it's just like, did you recognize anyone else? He's like, well, no, there were these 2 guys there. They look familiar. He's like, yeah, the drop-off situation. It's like, well, that's why those 2 drivers never showed up. I'm like, just look at, I love it, just the bewilderment on his face when he's acting it up. I'm like, huh? What? Oh, I didn't, and it's just like walking away so smug now, kind of just being like, and hook, line, and sinker. Now he's Beck's number 2. So I was like, I love how that whole situation played out. So that was dope how that sequence played out. So I'm excited to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.